is Jena, and I am going to be continuing on with our discussion of advanced inventory. Last week, we took a look at the preferences for advanced inventory so that we could get a little bit of insight on what features are available and what exactly they mean when we enable them. So with today's webinar, I'd like to go through and discuss use of some of the main or typical features that the majority of our clients and customers use. Now, getting into talking about advanced inventory, like I said, I want to talk about the most used or commonly used advanced inventory features. So as we saw, there were a handful of different areas in advanced inventory that we are able to enable or turn on. Sites and serial and lot numbers are two of the primary ones that our customers use. When we're talking about all of the features as a whole, I do want to go through why some of the other features aren't used as often. FIFO, as an example, is one of the features that is available with advanced inventory. For a lot of our customers, if their inventory isn't perishable, or if it doesn't have any kind of expiration date or even a warranty date, FIFO isn't necessarily needed. One of the things I also always talk through with our customers on FIFO is that it does require some additional internal QC or review to make sure that when we're handling customer order fulfillment, we are pulling the oldest inventory first to make sure that it lines up with what QuickBooks is deducting from our on hand. So those are just some examples of when FIFO would or wouldn't be used. In addition, the sales order fulfillment and purchase order management features aren't used as heavily as some of these other ones, just because it can potentially add some additional steps when you're looking for that line of sight for team members who are working remotely. So Intuit does require that you use its handheld device in order to use that mobile functionality. So sometimes the pros to having that mobile feature doesn't always outweigh the additional steps needed to use them. Now, when we're talking about sites and serial or lot numbers, I want to go through first where these get used and then how we can apply them from a reporting standpoint, as well as order of operations for when this information should be input into the system. One of the common questions that we get asked is, do these go on a purchase order, or when do I input this information? When we're talking about inventory receiving, which is hopefully the first step that we're taking, we want to make sure we're bringing inventory into our system first before we can do any kind of customer order fulfillment. We would be inputting this information at the time of entering that item receipt or that bill. So if I come in here to our QuickBooks file, I can go ahead and look at where that information gets applied and then where we can see it from a reporting standpoint. When I'm going through and doing my receiving, I can use my vendors tab and either choose to just receive in my inventory quantities, or I can receive my items and enter a bill at the same time if we're ready to pay our vendors. Both are going to accomplish the same function of bringing our inventory quantities in. So when I choose either of these options, you'll see in the body of this transaction, I've got these additional fields down here to input information into. So when I select an item that I want to receive in, if we have sites as well as bins enabled, QuickBooks is going to require that you input this information. So if I, for example, pick a company I'd like to go ahead and receive items in for, once I select my inventory parts, after I've input my quantity, if I attempt to save and close my transaction, QuickBooks is going to give me this warning that says I must assign a location to every inventory part that I'm bringing in. That's also a key point to note here. If you are doing any kind of receiving for anything not inventory related, so if you've got non-inventory parts as an example, that you are also receiving in, QuickBooks does not require a site for that information. It's only applied to inventory parts and assemblies. So before I can receive in my inventory, I have to tell QuickBooks which site I'm bringing it into. And then again, if we've got that secondary layer of our location tracking turned on with bins, I also have to choose a bin here. I can then input my serial number as well. You have the option to choose whether or not serial numbers or lot numbers are required. For a lot of our customers, these are not required across all of their items for tracking purposes. And if that's the case, you can just make sure that preference is enabled accordingly in the advanced inventory settings. But I can choose if I want to input any kind of serial or batch/lot number here. And once I've input this information, I can go ahead and say save and close. And again, this functionality is going to be identical whether or not we're bringing in inventory on an item receipt or bringing it in on a vendor bill. One of the things to note is that that is the stage that it gets brought in when we're talking about bringing our inventory in. It's not information that comes in on the purchase order. So this is always an ask. Typically, that's not information that we would have on the front end unless we've only got one inventory site that we're bringing inventory into. Otherwise, the majority of the time, that information is noted once we've actually got products in. So this isn't information that would be set up on the purchase order. It would be applied at the actual inventory receiving state. One of the common misconceptions that a lot of our clients will do is they will actually go through the customer order fulfillment piece first and then try to back into that information by doing the receiving after the fact. What ends up happening is if we've got a sales order in the system that we want to transition to an invoice, what ends up happening is if we don't already have inventory received in at this site and bin location, QuickBooks will either do one of two things. It will cause the item to go negative if we don't have those preferences enabled to make sure that we don't sell into the negative quantity, or it will allow us to sell into the negative and our inventory will show negative until we go through that receiving process. Both of which we want to avoid. We don't want to be selling into the negative because of the way QuickBooks handles negative inventory. It does cause corruption. So our order of operations should always be that we're taking in inventory first and going through the receiving steps. At that receiving point, like we saw when we're entering our item receipt or our vendor bill, QuickBooks will require us to input that site and bin information as well as the serial or lot number so that that information shows available when we want to go through and do our customer order fulfillment. Next, I'd like to go ahead and talk about what reporting becomes available when we enable these different features. One of the first things I want to talk about is what is the difference between the standard inventory valuation and an inventory valuation by site report. If I come back here to our QuickBooks file, under our reports tab in our inventory section, you'll see that these additional reports have been enabled with turning on those features. Our inventory valuation report and our inventory valuation summary report should have the same totals overall, but they will show us different information. When I look at running our inventory valuation summary report, this is just giving me what we like to call global values. So it's showing me my overall quantity on hand across all sites and bins in the total asset value. Whereas the inventory valuation by summary report is going to give me my breakout by individual site. You can see these slightly gray rows in my report, these are indicative of the different sites that I have inventory quantities at. So again, when we look at the roll-up of these or the overall cumulative value of the item quantities at each site level, it should mirror what is on my inventory valuation summary report. If it doesn't, then again, there is the potential for some sort of corruption or damage to be present, or maybe a bugged transaction. But these two reports overall should total to the same value. One just gives you the individual breakout by site. Like we talked about last week, why the report by site is helpful is because if we do have any negative instances, this report will let us know if we've got a negative quantity in a certain location, versus our global report won't reflect that if it's just giving us our final quantity on hand value. So this is some additional line of sight that the by site report will allow you to see. In keeping with talking about reports, not just for our site information, there are reports for the bin tracking as well. Within our inventory, we don't have a specific report for inventory valuation summary by site, but we do have items by bin location. So when I run this report, any item that has a bin associated with it will show that quantity here. So again, we can see that kind of hierarchy view. Also, if we do have any serial or lot numbers associated with these quantities on hand, they would show in this column here. As you can see, for an example, with this anchor spring item, this on-hand quantity is related to this serial number. So that information will also show as available. And then on these reports, you can always customize or filter to drill down into a specific site location. You'll notice up top here right now, it's listed for multiple inventory sites, meaning all sites are available on this report. But I can come in here and choose from this drop down, and it gives me my parent or header sites as well as my bin locations underneath. So I can come in here and choose a specific site and bin that I want to see what quantities I have on hand. For any kind of serial or lot number reports, those are going to be the same. Again, QuickBooks treats those features pretty similarly. The thing to note is that we just don't have the capability to have both of those enabled. It is one or the other. But when we're talking about serial or lot numbers, we've got these few reports up top. So we've got a transaction list by serial number. So I can come in here and pick a particular item that I'd like to see, and it will give me all transaction history for that item and the serial numbers associated with each of those transactions. So if you want to see any kind of item history related to a specific serial number, this report will give you that information. One of the common reasons why a lot of our clients will use this is if there is any kind of return or a refund or an item gets sent back for repair, usually the serial number is an easy way to identify the number that's being sent back through the system. So it's a great means for tracking if we need any additional line of sight on that item. In addition to that report, we've also got serial numbers in stock and then serial numbers in stock by site. Again, we would have these mirrored for lot numbers as well. So if we just want to see what items have a serial number available, in this case, I've only got one item with a serial number. It tells me here. I can always work to customize these reports. One thing you'll see here with the majority of these inventory related reports is that the display or the fields that show available are not something we can typically modify, but you can use the filters tab to drill down into specific item detail. So not too much we can do from a formatting or view standpoint, but we can use the filters tab to get us specific information based off of the serial and lot number or the site and bin information. One of the things we also like to note when we're talking about these features is what happens if we decide we don't want to use them anymore. If you determine you don't need to do any kind of serial or lot number tracking, or maybe we consolidate our warehouses and we don't have multiple locations where our inventory is being stored, you can always disable those features. QuickBooks doesn't remove that historical information when sites and bins or serial and lot numbers was used. What happens is those fields go away on the transaction. So when we look at our item receipt or vendor bill as an example, if we disable any of these features, these fields no longer show as available on the transaction template, and you won't see that information anymore from a reporting standpoint. If you re-enable the preferences, that information does become available again. So I always like to note that here, just because that is a common question with our clients. The information doesn't go away, it's just no longer available from a reporting standpoint unless you enable that feature again. Now, the last feature I want to go through is use of landed costs. So again, talking through the most commonly used features, we've got sites or locations, and within those sites or locations, we've got bins and then serial and lot numbers. The third feature that is most commonly used by our clients is this landed cost feature to enable updating our per unit costs on our items. So the first thing I want to go ahead and talk through is how do we set up landed feature in general to be able to use that on our inventory. If I come in here to our QuickBooks file, the first thing that gets set up when we're using landed cost is a chart of accounts account for this feature. When I go ahead and search landed cost, you'll notice here that it's an other current asset account. This is because the feature is meant to create a new per unit cost based off of the static cost for the item itself, as well as the additional shipping and handling costs. So we have it set up as an other current asset account because it's contributing to updating our overall inventory asset values. So setting up a landed cost account is going to be the first step that we do. The next step that we would do is we would set up other charge items on our item list that are coded to that account. So if I come in here, you can see I've already got a couple set up as freight and shipping, and we want to make sure that this item is coded to our landed cost account. If it's not coded to that account, we're not able to use that feature to calculate the new landed cost of our items. So again, step one, setting up the other current asset account. Step two, setting up our shipping and handling items that are mapped to our landed cost account. Once these items are set up, you would go through your inventory receiving process as normal to bring in your inventory quantities, but there would be a second step now to enter a vendor bill for shipping. So if I come in here and I enter a vendor bill for shipping, let's say we enter it for FedEx as an example. I'm going to go ahead and enter my shipping bill. I'm going to put in my amount, and I'm going to use my landed cost item here. So we want to make sure that we are pushing this vendor bill through the item and not the landed cost account itself. It won't function the same way if we just use the GL account. We need to use the items. So my shipping is going to be $1,000, and this is going to be allocated to my item bill that brought in our quantities. So once I've saved this, I've got my bill in the system now. I can come in here to my inventory and I can tell QuickBooks that I want to calculate landed cost. And what this feature allows us to do is You can see it has a shipping and handling area designated for those expenses. And then we've got our items and assemblies area for our actual product bills. I tell QuickBooks that I want to go ahead and add my shipping bill here. It would let me know if I have any in the system, so I can choose a custom period and it will pull for the entirety of that period. Once I allocate my vendor or shipping bill, I can tell QuickBooks how much I want to designate to my inventory parts in order to make sure my inventory has the correct cost. So this is a really helpful tool when our customers are engaging with international vendors where those shipping and handling expenses, things like duties come into play. There are additional expenses to bring that inventory into stock. So having this landed cost feature allows us to make sure that we are costing our inventory correctly and we have the correct cost allocated and therefore our shipping price to our customers. That's a big piece that we want to make note of as well, is if we are incurring any kind of additional cost to bring in our inventory, we want to make sure that we're maintaining that correct margin or markup on our inventory parts. So once that cost has been updated, we have the capability to look at our item price and make any kind of adjustments to ensure that we are maintaining that original markup from our cost. So landed cost in general allows us to make sure that we're keeping track of our per unit price correctly. As an alternative, some things that our customers will do instead of using that landed cost feature is they will send the shipping or freight expenses directly through cost of goods sold. That still overall will show as a cost to the company for customer operations, but it doesn't relate it back to the item and the overall item price to bring that item in. Where that can be helpful is determining if we want to continue working with those vendors based off of the cost it takes to bring those items in. So when we're looking at reports here, like a purchases by item report, it can be especially helpful to determine if those are vendors we want to continue to engage with, or if we need to determine another source or route to bring that inventory into stock. Also lets us know what our margin is when we compare our purchase by vendor to our sales by item information. So it allows us to see what that final markup or profitability is when we're talking about increased cost to bring that inventory in versus what our sales value is. So again, just to recap, when we're talking about use of advanced inventory features, the main features that the majority of our clients are using and benefiting from when we're talking about the QuickBooks features are going to be our sites and bins, as well as serial and or lot numbers. With the serial and lot number features, we do get that addition of the expiration date. So if we want to use that almost in the form of FIFO to make sure that we're using inventory before it expires or the warranty is out of date, we can use that information to ensure inventory is being relieved properly. The second feature is going to be that landed cost feature. Again, this is going to enable us to make sure that our per unit cost for our inventory is accurate to help ensure our customer order margins are correct. We do have those additional features for FIFO, sales order fulfillment, and purchase order management. But again, not all of those provide a benefit or do require some additional internal QC to make sure that we are using them efficiently and that what we're doing outside of the system matches what QuickBooks is doing inside of the system. I hope that this was helpful to you guys. Thank you so much.